On a summer afternoon in 2022, a quiet corner of rural Montana became the centre of a chilling mystery. A boy named Ryker Webb vanished from his own backyard on the edge of a vast wilderness. As storms raged and temperatures plunged, the community feared the worst. Hi everyone, welcome back to This Case Takes Place. For today's episode, we're going to be covering the case of Ryker Webb, and we're joined with a guest as well today.
Kobe. Hopefully this time his fur won't get everywhere.
Fur-free.
Last time we became asphyxiated
Yeah, we
by
couldn't
the
do
little
it.
strands.
There was so much fur.
I know. I shaved him, and somehow he's still just a fluff ball. But anyway, we'll see how we go.
So this case takes place in the year 2022 in Montana. Child disappearances in wilderness areas are rare, but when they occur, they trigger massive search and rescue operations. Authorities know that time is critical, and young children are, of course, especially vulnerable to exposure, dehydration, and injury. The first 24 hours are crucial. Rescue workers work against the clock, aware that each passing hour in the wild will decrease a child's odds of being found safe and alive. And tragically, it's exponential.
It was Friday, the 3rd of June, 2022, in a rural area near Troy, Montana. That afternoon, 3-year-old Ryker Webb was playing in the yard outside his family home, accompanied by the family dog. His father was watching him, but just for a moment, the father briefly went inside the house to grab something, leaving Riker and the pooch outside. After rummaging in the house for what he needed, the father returned to the yard and looked around. In that moment, a cold chill ran down his body. Time stood still as he looked around in confusion and absolute fear. Riker was nowhere in sight. He was gone. However, the dog still remained. At first, Riker's parents thought he couldn't be far. I mean, how far could someone of that age really wander off to? He had to be close. The property in which the family lived in is in a sparsely populated wooded area, and they began searching around the yard and calling his name. But minutes turned into an hour, and panic began to set in. For 2 hours, his mother and father frantically scoured their property and the nearby woods, shouting for Riker. It seems like they didn't call for help for some time. The sheriff later said, quote, "They were checking their entire property. They were yelling. I would assume they just decided to look on their own." End of quote. At around 4:53 p.m. that day, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office received an emergency call from the concerned neighbor reporting a missing child. The neighbor explained that the parents had been screaming for the boy for a long time with no answer, and that he thought it would be best if the police came right away. This 911 call set into motion one of the largest search efforts the area had ever seen. Sheriff Darren Short said his deputies treated the incident with extreme urgency. A 3-year-old alone in rough Montana wilderness is every rural parent's nightmare. Riker was officially listed as a missing person, and an alert went out to all local law enforcement and rescue teams. Deputies arriving on scene confirmed the basics. The missing child was Ryker Webb, just 3, he was nearly 4, years old, with bright red hair and blue eyes. One challenge emerged immediately. No one was sure what Riker was wearing. In the chaos, an initial clothing description given to searchers turned out to be inaccurate, and in truth, his attire at the time he disappeared was unknown. Which, how do you not know what your child was wearing that day?
I guess with that stress, you probably just forget, I guess.
Maybe. That made the search even harder. Rescuers had to look for the boy himself, not a particular collared shirt or jacket, which I imagine would make things harder. Because if you're looking around, especially if everything's green and everything's kind of the one, palette, if you knew that you were looking for a yellow jacket, your eye just really zones in on just that one thing. It would make it a lot easier to spot. But unfortunately, they didn't know what he was wearing. So they knew they had to move fast. The daylight was already waning by the time teams mobilized, and ominously, storm clouds were gathering overhead.
Within hours of Riker's disappearance, a full-scale search and rescue operation was underway. The police teamed up with the local search and rescue teams and combed the area with their fire department. Neighbours and family and friends joined in, spreading out through the thick timber around the Webb home. The search area was the Bull Lake Valley, a remote region of northwestern Montana where homes are few and wilderness is vast. Now, what makes young children who go missing outdoors tricky is that children often behave unpredictably. Some might wander towards water or follow animal trails, whilst others will simply just hide, and they might be too scared to even come out if someone shouts their name that they don't recognise. Searchers are often trained to look in small, enclosed spaces because frightened kids may crawl under logs, under bushes, and hide in some debris to seek shelter. In fact, there's a classic search and rescue teaching called hug a tree, instructing lost children to stay put, hug a tree, and wait for an adult to find them. Cases over the years have shown that children who find some shelter and stay in one place have a better chance of survival and being found. But as you can imagine, spending even a night alone in the wilderness is dangerous for the majority of people if they're unprepared, never mind a small child at the age of 3. What began as a normal day would soon become a frantic battle with the community's determination to find a missing boy in an unforgiving wilderness. Ground teams walked shoulder to shoulder through the dense forest, calling Riker's name and scanning for any sign of his presence. Search dogs with their handlers arrived and began sniffing for the child's scent. By the early evening, several drones were in the air using thermal imaging technology to scan for Riker, but they were unsuccessful. Realizing the need for even more resources, the sheriff reached out for aerial support. A specialized rescue helicopter was scrambled and headed towards the area. But there was soon to be an obstacle in the rescuers' path. The weather was turning much faster than expected. At dusk, as dusk approached on the 3rd of June, the sky opened up. Thunderstorms rolled across the valley, unleashing heavy rain and lightning. A thick mist clung to the mountains and clouds sank low, obscuring visibility. The wind picked up, rattling the branches of the tall pines, which made searching for Riker almost impossible. If he was out there, he likely wouldn't hear them. By late Friday night, there was no trace of the boy, no footprints, no responses to the calls. There was only the sound of rain and thunder. A code red alert was then sent out to residents in the nearby area, urging anyone to check their properties, as it was suspected that if Riker was out there, he may have sought some shelter as the weather was turning so violent. Homes, sheds, barns, vehicles, any place that a boy might hide, the police asked locals to check. However, once again, nobody found anything.
By the morning of Saturday, June 4th, Riker had been missing for an agonizing 18 hours and the search intensified further. More helicopters were brought in and used their advanced thermal sensors to scan the rugged terrain from above. Many areas were so dense with foliage that searchers could only see a few yards ahead. They had to practically step on every log and peer under every bush. Imagine trying to find a pint-sized human in an endless maze of greenery. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack that stretched for miles. The weather remained rain and thunder. Temperatures dropped into the low 40s degrees Fahrenheit or around 5 degrees Celsius. Conditions were so bad that the storm would have washed away any tracks or clues Riker might have left behind. Tracking dogs struggled as the rain and wind dispersed scent trails. The thick cloud over also meant darkness fell early under the trees, even in daytime. All the while on everyone's mind were the dangers lurking in these woods. This area of Montana is home to wildlife that could easily harm a child. The woods around Bull Lake are inhabited by mountain lions and black bears. There were also other hazards, open mine shafts from old prospecting sites, swift creek currents, and the risk that Riker might succumb to the cold or exhaustion. By Saturday evening, roughly 30 hours had passed since Riker was last seen. The toll on the searchers physically and emotionally was heavy. They'd been pushing through tough conditions with little rest. Sheriff Short would later recall that on Friday, everyone was motivated and optimistic because the search was still fresh. But by the end of Saturday, morale started to falter. Everybody, quote, everybody was starting to get the feeling that this may turn from a rescue to recovery at any time, unquote. The hard truth was setting in. If they didn't find the boy soon, then, well, still they refused to give up. Plans were made to resume at first light Sunday with yet more volunteers arriving. The community was determined to bring Riker home one way or another.
Then there were some clues. Ground teams noticed something intriguing on a trail leading away from the Webb property. Scattered along the trail were small rocks that had just been freshly turned over, as if someone had been picking them up, searching for something underneath, and it looked like exactly what a curious young little boy might do whilst wandering in the wilderness. The sheriff later explained that Riker loved bugs and insects, and according to his family, he would often chase butterflies or flip over rocks to see what kind of insects would be lurking underneath. These overturned stones were an indication that Riker himself had passed that way, likely entertaining himself by looking for bugs as he walked further and further away from home. This clue helped the search team narrow their focus in a particular direction. It suggested that Riker hadn't been taken away in a car and been kidnapped, and that he was out there alone in the woods on foot, distracted by bugs, and that he was likely just turning over these stones, kept walking, not realizing how far he had actually gone. Searchers adjusted their grid pattern to follow the general path, pushing deeper into the forest area where the rocks were found. Morale was boosted with this fresh lead, but as Saturday night gave way to the second night, many now began to accept the worst. The chances of him being alive were dwindling.
Now we arrive on Sunday, June 5th, 2022. So this is the third day of the search, the Sunday. By this time, roughly 53 personnel were actively out in the field, but nobody was ready to quit. And then in the early evening on Sunday, the incredible breakthrough came, but from an unexpected source. In the neighboring county just over the line in Sanders County, which borders Lincoln County, a young couple had come for a weekend visit to their cabin in the woods. This cabin was about 2.5 miles from the Webb's family home. The couple heard a faint noise near the old shed on the property, almost like a tiny voice. They had heard news about the missing boy, but thought to themselves, surely not. They decided to take a look, and when they did, they quite literally couldn't believe their eyes. There was Ryker Webb alive inside their shed. The little boy was curled up in an odd spot. He had tucked himself into an empty lawnmower grass catcher bag attached to a push mower stored in the shed. It seems that at some point he came across the cabin's outbuilding and decided to hide from the wind and rain, and then crawled into the canvas bag. So this is the bag that you kind of attach to the lawnmower that catches the shorn lawn clippings. And he obviously stayed into this bag to stay warm. In that improvised sleeping bag, he'd spent at least one night hiding from the storm. One of the couples snapped a photo on their phone and then jumped into the car and raced to the search command post that had been set up nearby, ready to deliver the amazing news. At the checkpoint, Sheriff Short saw a car pull up at high speed. A young man got out looking frantic but excited and quickly showed the sheriff the photo on his phone. He said, quote, "I think this is the boy you were all looking for." Sheriff Short and deputies followed the man back to the cabin through winding back roads. Arriving at the shed, rescuers saw the boy exactly as described. He was standing in the shed, frightened and confused. The sheriff asked, "Do you want to go see Mum and Dad?" Riker's eyes lit up. With this, the sheriff picked him up. Riker was immediately wrapped in coats and blankets by the rescuers. Despite being missing for 48 hours, he was remarkably in good spirits and health. He was hungry, thirsty and cold, but overall okay. Sheriff Short also relayed what Riker was able to tell them about his experience. Remember, he's only 3, so his recollections were simple but telling. Riker told the sheriff that he had left home to go on a walk. In his innocent mind, he went exploring, quote, just beyond the yard, and then suddenly realized he didn't know how to get back. He said that he kept walking until, quote, he got tired. As news spread that Riker was found alive, the community, and indeed the whole nation, breathed a sigh of relief, and Riker quickly became known as the, quote, little boy who survived the Montana wilderness.
Now, with Riker safe, people began to analyse the story. There were a few strange things that didn't quite line up, and people found it to be somewhat suspicious. Number 1, the storm dumped inches of rain and brought dangerous lightning, and the weather was unusually bad for June. For 2 nights, temperatures dropped below 5 degrees Celsius or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. A child of 3 could have easily developed hypothermia in these conditions, especially if he was wet. Yet when Riker was found, he was cold, but he was not in a life-threatening state. And next is the distance travelled. As noted, Riker wandered about 2.5 miles from home. For a toddler just 3 years old, this is quite far, especially through rough, tough and dangerous terrain. There were steep areas, thick trees, and no indication that he followed a clear trail. Most children that age are found much closer to home, often within a mile or even less. Riker's trek put him into the next county. He essentially travelled in 2 days what some 3-year-olds might barely manage in a straight line. This distance is not unheard of, but it certainly places Riker's case on the more extreme end for his age group. Also, this is worth noting too, that there should have been predators all around the area. The area where Riker survived is known to have bears and mountain lions. A small child could have easily attracted the attention of such an animal. The fact he wasn't harmed by wildlife is a relief and extremely lucky. But some people have also pointed that perhaps the thunder and rain kept the animals away and kept Riker safe.
One aspect that many found unusual was the 2-hour delay before authorities were notified that Riker went missing. Instead of immediately calling 911 when they realized he had wandered off, Riker's parents spent a couple of hours searching on their own. By the time the neighbours called it in at 4:53 p.m. on Friday, Riker had already been gone for over 2 hours. In missing child cases, those early moments are critical. Calling for help sooner can make a difference in widening the search and alerting others. The delay sparked questions and later an official inquiry into why there was hesitance to involve law enforcement. Some found it odd and troubling, fueling speculation about the family's decision that day. Which then leads us on to the next point. It wasn't the family who called 911. It was a neighbor who heard the shouts and took action. This detail struck many as unusual. Typically, parents would call as soon as possible, as soon as they realize a toddler is missing and can't be found. The neighbor's involvement suggests the parents were perhaps reluctant, or maybe in shock, trying to fix it themselves until someone else intervened. It highlights how critical the neighbor's intuition was. Without that call, the organized search might have been delayed even further. Finally, the last thing that was really strange is that the family dog didn't follow Riker. Many people have pointed out that this is quite odd. Dogs are, of course, quite protective. Why didn't the dog follow?
So with all of these elements combined, it made the Ryker Webb case quite strange. The unanswered questions lingered, and with this, as you can imagine, multiple theories started to emerge. In the immediate aftermath of Riker's rescue, law enforcement shifted from search mode to investigation mode. Although everyone was relieved that Riker of course survived, the Lincoln County office had some questions that they wanted to get to the bottom of. The fact that Riker was out of sight long enough to disappear and then no one called for 2 hours raised some very legitimate concerns. On scene Sunday, as a precaution, the Child Protective Services were called and did a check on the family and the home. By all accounts, what they found was that Riker's parents were genuinely distraught and terrified throughout the entire ordeal. There's no evidence that they intentionally did anything to harm their son. In fact, the detail about them searching frantically and yelling for 2 hours showed that they did actively try to find him. As far as the police were concerned, this appeared to be a brief lapse in judgment on the parents' behalf, and that they turned their back for a minute, leading to Riker to disappear. However, authorities still wanted to ensure that this wasn't anything more sinister. The identities of Riker's parents were never made public, and as of the months following, no charges were announced. This suggests that while the investigation might have given the family a stern reminder about supervision, it likely did not uncover any evidence of intentional harm. The media moved on, and the Webbs understandably did not want to speak about what happened. In a small town like Montana, they might have wanted to return back to normal as soon as possible and avoid public scrutiny. For Riker, after being discharged from the hospital, reports indicate that he went back home with his family and was in good health. The local community was both relieved and a little bit shaken by the incident. The image of Riker left many people quite disturbed and uneasy. In the months that followed, Riker's story largely faded from national headlines. However, it found a second life online, particularly amongst people fascinated by unexplained disappearances and survival stories. And that's where a range of theories came from. They stretched from pretty sensible to quite obscure, weird theories, but this began to circulate online, and people began to wonder, was the official narrative actually true? Many people believed that the official theory was completely made up or wrong, and that something far more sinister or eerie had happened to Riker. Now, let's start with the official theory. So this is exactly what the sheriff said happened, and was pieced together by Riker's own words and some evidence that was pieced together after he was found. So essentially what they think is Riker probably followed something interesting like a trail of insects or a butterfly, and that he kept going and likely just didn't notice how far he walked from home. At a young age, this is entirely possible, and kids have the tendency to basically have no risk assessment. They can run in one direction and just not realize what's going on. So that's totally plausible. However, how did he survive the wilderness? People still found it strange that someone of his age would even have sought shelter. People think that at the age of 3, he should likely have just, as tragic as it sounds, should have probably have passed away and shouldn't have been found. So that led people to wonder, was this done intentionally? So parental negligence or deliberate harm? From early on into the case, people began to focus on the parents' lack of action, and they found this to be rather suspicious. On social media and numerous forums, people questioned how could loving parents let a 3-year-old out of sight long enough to disappear? Why didn't they call 911 right away? Such questions led to accusations of negligence, and in a few extreme cases, people began to speculate that the parents might have done this intentionally and then concocted a story to cover it up. Now, right away, it's important to remember that the police found nothing suspicious. However, this didn't stop people from speculating. Some people wondered, what if they wanted Riker to disappear temporarily? Now, there have been cases of parents who lost their child, and it turned out that they did this for their own strange narcissistic reasons. They wanted the spotlight, they wanted sympathy, and they wanted the excitement of the media giving them attention. Well, this wouldn't be the first time that this has happened before. 9-year-old Shannon Matthews in the UK was reported missing on the 19th of February 2008 in West Yorkshire. It later emerged that her mother Karen and her accomplice Michael Donovan orchestrated the disappearance as part of a scheme for financial gain. Their plan involved hiding Shannon in Donovan's flat, drugging her to keep her calm, and then staging a public search to attract media attention. Donovan would later find Shannon and collect a £50,000 reward in which he and Karen intended to split. However, this wouldn't happen. Shannon was eventually found on the 14th of March 2008 in Donovan's flat, and the truth came to light. In December of 2008, both Karen and Michael Donovan were convicted of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and perverting the course of justice, and each received 8-year prison sentences. Some people believe that this is what the parents intended to do with Riker, but that once things got too intense, they basically just got him, hid him in the shed, and then miraculously he was found.
So the next theory is the kidnapper theory. So some people have speculated that Ryker Webb may not have been alone in the woods at all, but instead was taken by someone and then later abandoned, or maybe quietly returned once the search became too intense. The alerts were everywhere. Could a kidnapper have grabbed him, panicked as the search exploded, and then left him where he'd been discovered? If that were the case, the theory goes it might explain why Riker seemed wide-eyed and frightened when found, possibly the result of encountering a stranger who had taken him away into the dark and scary woods. Some even suggested the shed was too lucky of a hiding place for a toddler to stumble on by himself in the middle of a storm. However, Sheriff Darren Shaw insists that this is not the case and that they found no sign of foul play, no tire tracks, no suspicious strangers reported in the area, and Riker himself said he had simply, quote, gone for a walk. He was dirty, bug-bitten, hungry, and cold in a way consistent with surviving outside, not with being cared for by someone else. Still, the kidnapper theory lingers in online discussions. Some believe this is just some kind of cover-up and that the family were pressured not to talk about because the kidnapper was someone of high status or something like this. I'm not inclined to believe this at all.
I don't believe that, but some people think it was something to do with human trafficking.
Right.
And that it got too intense and they didn't intend for it to get so publicly, widely publicised, and that they were told to keep quiet, and that's why they haven't talked about it since. But that's like a fringe theory. These are like the fringe theories of what people think happened.
Yeah. So that leads us to the next one, the missing 411. So in certain circles, Riker's story drew comparison to the so-called, quote, missing 411 cases. Missing 411 is a popular term referring to a cluster of mysterious, unexplained disappearances, which often involve children, in specifically wilderness areas. And this is popularized by researcher David Paulides. These cases are characterized by unusual circumstances like children vanishing almost instantly and then being found miles away in improbable locations, or having strange outcomes that don't line up with what a small child could realistically do. Enthusiasts of this theory might look at Riker's case and note some, quote, classic features. So, for example, he disappeared quickly. He traveled a surprisingly long distance of 2 miles. There was bad weather coincided with the disappearance, so therefore making the search really hard. And fourth, he ended up in a spot that had been presumably checked or was just outside the initial search zone. So on various online forums and YouTube channels that discuss mysterious cases, Riker's disappearance has been labeled as, quote, strange or bizarre, fueling suggestions that something beyond the ordinary had happened. Some suggest that Bigfoot carried him to the shed, or did he wander into a portal and then came back? And obviously these are extreme with obviously no evidence, but that's what people have speculated. Something perhaps supernatural had happened. Others might speculate about the involvement of forest spirits or the boy being protected of some kind by mysterious force. These ideas arise because in a few other cases, like a famous one where a toddler later said, quote, a bear kept me company, people love to hypothesize supernatural or cryptic explanations. Now, while Riker's 2.5-mile walk is remarkable, it's not beyond the capability of a determined child. The storm increased the danger, but also likely kept Riker in one place, which maybe saved his life. But here's one thing that does stick out for some people. The fact that he was found in a location that searchers had asked locals to check, which was a shed. But didn't they, the people who found him, weren't they arriving to it? Like, it was like an Airbnb,
They
right? Like
arrived
a
late.
holiday?
Yeah, but people were checking sheds anyway, apparently.
Right.
So, like, the police and whatever, fire, everyone who was searching, they were told to just look in sheds, just in
But
case.
the
Even if,
2.5 miles is further away. Do you think even all the way out there that they were checking everyone's sheds?
I'm not too sure how far they got. It keeps coming up online that the shed should have been checked. But
Yeah.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Just one thing that people point out as being weird. I don't think it's too weird. They either didn't get around to it yet. It was outside the radius. They probably didn't think it would have got 2.5 miles out yet. But
And if it was a holiday home, maybe no one was there to even check it.
no one was there to likely check it. It's just what people are saying online.
Yeah.
So we just cover
Yeah.
But now finally, we get to the most fringe theory, and that's that Riker supposedly wasn't the same boy. So another theory that gained traction in some corners of the internet was the idea that the child who emerged from the woods was somehow not actually Ryker Webb at all. When the sheriff's office released photos of him post-rescue, some online commenters claimed that the boy's appearance looked older or different, and that earlier photos of him looked nothing like this version of him that they'd just seen. Conspiracy people speculated that perhaps a different child had been substituted, or that officials weren't telling the full story. The idea spread partly because the photo released by authorities showed Riker wide-eyed, dishevelled and dirty, which naturally made him look unlike the natural smiling toddler who was in a safe environment. But it's important to mention that 2 nights in the cold woods, anyone, especially a 3-year-old, would look thinner, more tired and changed. They're not going to look the same. Experts have also pointed out that stress, lighting, angles, dehydration, amongst other things, drastically change how someone can look, and that's likely the explanation for why Riker looked so different. However, some people still believe that Riker was abducted and that the government have given a clone child to the parents.
The eyes are quite close together in the second picture, like when he was discovered.
They look they look similar, but they do look different. But I guess if I was lost in the woods for 2 days and I was dehydrated, hungry, cold, scared, whatever, you are going to look very different.
Of course.
But the eyes are widely different.
I mean, it's more so the things that, do you lose weight from your nose? Like the boys...
As people said, nose as
the
well.
Nose looks like
the same.
kind of thinner, and then the eyes are a bit closer together. I mean, again, obviously, like if you're gaunt, everything looks a bit more schmudge. Whereas, like, you know what I mean? So maybe it's just the weight loss.
He's in like this, like hospital lighting, which
fair.
definitely makes you look a bit different.
To
be fair. But that's like one thing that people always say online, like, this isn't the same boy. This is like a changeling event.
Yeah.
So there is like a phenomenon called the changelings, where parents lose their kid.
Yeah.
And the police bring another kid, and they're like, that's not my child. There was a movie called
Angelina Jolie.
Apparently it's based on like true stories and stuff.
Yeah.
Cover more of that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like the basic thing is like, I think when it comes to cases like this, people don't like ordinary explanations. They like to reach for something a bit more strange. But it's a weird one. I mean, he's lucky he survived. He's lucky he stumbled upon a shed. It's quick thinking for a little kid, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I am all for the conspiracies. Always.
Yeah, me too.
Always. But in this case, I think there isn't one, because even though 2.5 miles is a long way, if you've got nowhere to go, if you're a kid and you're determined, I mean, kids survive war zones.
Yeah, true. Oh my God, yeah.
So if you can get through horrific hardships in Lord knows where, Ukraine or whatever, I'm sure, imagine how many miles those kids walk just to find safety and shelter. The rain's coming. He probably doesn't want to go into a main house. He sees a shed. And something about the lawnmower bag that
Looks
he was
like
found
a
in.
Bed, little sleeping,
it's such a
sleeping bag.
kid thing, an innocent kid thing to like, let's go like snuggle in that. And in a shed, quiet little corner, like almost like a little mouse trying to find the smallest little spot. So that didn't seem like nefarious, like not insidious at all.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone took him. I mean, if you're religious, I definitely think you could say that there was like a guardian angel that maybe like helped him along. Like, but otherwise, I think it's in the realm of conceivable. And also in regards to the parents, like if a child of mine went missing, I don't think you think logically, like initially. And if it's just in your house, you're just immediately searching the areas, you're screaming out for them. It probably hasn't triggered that.
It's probably some time dilation. Like if you're panicking
you probably
and
don't
freaking
realize
out,
it's 2 hours has
you
passed.
probably think it's like minutes, not hours.
Yeah.
But apparently they were told off by the police for not calling right
For
away.
sure.
And like, why did your neighbour have to call?
Yeah.
But I guess there are other factors. I guess stress is a big thing.
Yeah.
But when I was researching this case, I was like, oh my God, someone took him and then just abandoned him in the shed when all these alerts went out.
Yeah.
That was what I thought personally, because that's what seemed the most plausible. But apparently Riker said, no, that never happened.
Yeah. I was just saying, I think that dog should go to the pound. I got absolutely hopeless because that dog, you know how you hear these beautiful stories? Like there was one in Australia where this old lady broke her hip. Like she fell over. It's like outback Australia. She falls over, kills her hip. Wow. Breaks her hip. And her little dog is like a little Maltese white dog, stayed with her all night and was the only reason she survived because kept her warm. He wouldn't leave her side. And then the next morning when like the day came out, he knew she was safe enough. He ran to the neighbor's house and barked away until eventually someone like raised the alarm.
Yeah, this dog didn't do that.
No. Hopeless. Poor Riker, honestly.
Riker in the wilderness. Not a very loyal pooch.
No, straight to the pound.
But that's the case of Ryker Webb.
Yes.
And I'm sure we're going to get some comments from people saying all kinds of conspiratorial stuff.
Please leave them if you
But
know.
please do if you think Bigfoot, or another one that people thought, aliens as well. It was an
Yeah.
alien abduction case. That's another one that people think.
Mm.
If you think that, that's fine. But yeah,
You're wrong.
Yeah, you're also wrong, but yeah, it's fine. But that was the case of Ryker Webb. So thank you very much for watching. And I believe as of right now, our memberships will be turned on. So if you enjoy the content, please consider becoming a member and helping out the channel. But apart from that, unsubscribe to. All the best and take care. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Bye. His little arms with this, the little sheriff.
What?
What a funny visual that is. The little sheriff raised his arms.
Riker picked
Take me, Riker. The line is
Riker's
just
eyes lit up.
Riker's eyes lit up. So he raised his little arms, and with this, he picked up the little sheriff. Riker, come here. Pick me up.
The sheriff asks, "Do you want to go see Mum and Dad?" Riker's eyes lit up.
The sheriff raised his little arms. Oh my God.
So stupid.
Oh my Christ! I'm sweating now. That made me sweat.
I know.
I've got my left ear is like basically deaf.